During the summer of 1980, a young Connecticut couple moved into a rented home to start a new life together. But their presence unknowingly releases a demon that will haunt not only them, but their loved ones. Initially, the demon possesses a young boy in the family before turning on the young man who attempts to challenge it. Even with the help of famous demonographers Ed and Lorraine Warren, a murder and trial will soon follow. This salacious story would even develop into a motion picture. This is the possession of Arne Cheyenne Johnson.
Welcome to another episode of Hosting Evil. I'm Jess.
And I'm Emily, and I hope you're ready for another spooky case.
Emily, I'm always ready.
Okay, so I will begin. And my case, I think, is going to be one of those crazy cases that definitely, when we started this recording, made me think, okay, maybe this is why we're having these technical difficulties. So this case involves the Glatzel family and Arne Cheyenne Johnson. So first, let me tell you about the Glatzels. So the Glatzels consist of the mother, Judy, adult daughter, Debbie, son, Alan, and the youngest son, David, who was 11 years old at the time of these events. And then there's Arne Johnson, and he's the boyfriend of Debbie. He's 19 and she's 26 when all this is happening.
Good for him.
I always think that age difference.
It's a lot. It's a lot at that age.
When you're 19, yeah. And also young guy to older woman, like always a little bit questionable.
Yeah.
But that's just my judgment.
We're being judgy. It's okay.
Yeah. So for this case, though, I'm just going to say, like, when you hear me talk about the Glatzel family, I'm usually counting Arne as a part of this. So Debbie's family, they live in Brookfield, Connecticut. And this all takes place during the summer of 1980 and then the winter of 1981. During the summer of 1980, Arne and Debbie have decided that they're going to move in together. They're on track, it seems like, to get married, have a family. So they start searching for a house to rent, and they looked for months, and they finally find this house to rent in nearby Newtown, Connecticut, close to Brookfield. They find this house, they're renting it, but they poured like all of their money into getting it. So already there's a financial
burden
going on, right?
What do you mean? So like they like had to did they do like paint and everything, or you mean just getting like the first month, last month?
I think like getting the first
deposit?
month, last month.
He's 19. What kind of job does he really have?
He was a tree surgeon, so he worked on like cutting down trees, stuff like that. And Debbie was a dog groomer.
Right.
Before they even move in, though, there's already that financial burden, but there's also issues with the house. And Debbie's mother, Judy, felt like the house was dark, even when the shades were open. Even when there's light in the room, she felt like it was really dark. And she felt like there was something off. She also felt like she was being watched when she was in the house.
So you're like, trademark, this house is creepy type of
we shouldn't stay
stuff.
here, right? But Debbie was like,
bitch, please, I just spent all my money on this house.
We just spent a lot of money. And also, like, they emphasized that it took them months to
save up
here.
For that. Like, and their money's gone.
Right. And just to be clear, a lot of the information that I got on this case actually came from a documentary, a part of a series called, like, Shock Docs, The Devil Made Me Do It. So that had interviews from Arne and from Debbie.
The real people.
So I'm taking the information
from their mouth.
Straight from the horse's mouth.
That's awesome.
So, okay. So she tries to convince Debbie, but she's financially stuck and they're going to continue. So in July 1980, they're moving in. And Judy, Alan, and David all come over to help Debbie and Arne move. David is sent to sweep up the master bedroom, and when he's in there, he's pushed onto this waterbed that was left behind, and he sees a shadowy figure of an old man telling him, beware.
Ooh.
He runs out of the house and like goes and sits outside and will not go into the house. So Debbie tries to talk to him because this isn't like normal behavior for him, but he won't tell her anything. He just refuses to go into the house, and he's like, yeah, I'm ready to go home.
And he's 11, so I mean,
Yeah.
his little brain can't even like really like comprehend what he just saw.
Yeah. So, but he knew that it freaked him out.
Well, yeah,
right?
I mean, any old man telling you to beware while you're
Yeah.
laying on a waterbed's freaky.
So Debbie's like, we've got shit to do.
Get to it.
So then she asks Alan to help. And so she sends Alan to the master. And when Alan goes, he is suddenly locked into the room by an unseen force. And he's like fighting with the door to get out. And he can't until like the door decides to open.
To let it out. Oh, crazy.
So already weird shit's happening in the house.
And they haven't even lived. They're not even technically living there yet. They're moving in
there, and they're already being told you're not welcome.
Now, was this a duplex? Was there other people living in this building? It was just
like
theirs.
Just a house.
Okay.
Yeah, just a random house. And these aren't like cities. I think I get the impression that they're more like
rural.
Town,
Yeah.
you know, maybe not rural, but not like, we're not talking about a major city, you know. Debbie kind of like plays this all off though. And so that night, the family returns to their Brookfield, to the house, the Glatzel's house. Arnie and Debbie come with them because they're not fully moved in yet. So that night, the brothers decide that they're going to tell Judy, Arnie, and Debbie what they saw, because they hadn't said it when they were still at the location. So Alan explains being locked into the master, and then David explains this transparent man who tells him to beware. I thought that this was hilarious in the documentary, and I have to share it. So Arnie says that he asked David if he found some pills around and took them because maybe he's having some bad effect.
Oh my God, that was his explanation for it all. He took
Which,
some
like,
psychedelic drugs.
What a perfect like 1980s
19-year-old to say.
19-year-old to say. He's like, yo, bro, like,
What were you
did you pick up
smoking?
some pills?
Get some Quaaludes.
Right? So David is like adamant that that's not the case. And this also isn't his personality. Like, David is usually explained to be like a very sweet, fun-loving kid who just wants to hang out. He likes games and stuff, but he's not really a storyteller either. So they're a little critical already about what he's saying. And then David says that when he closes his eyes, he can see the old man. And then he starts to explain that the old man is still at the rental house, and at night he turns into a beast, or as it will soon be called, like the beast. Where when he's the beast, he has black hole eyes, jagged teeth, and pointed ears. And David explains that the beast is still in contact with David.
Even though he's not there in the house.
Yes. And he could close his eyes and see this monster stalking through the rental house. And he also says that he can hear the beast who keeps telling him to beware, and that Arnie and Debbie should not move in or there will be a price to pay.
Oh. So the beast doesn't want them there.
No, not at all. So they get all this information, right?
From the 11-year-old.
Yes. And also from Alan, who I guess is like kind of a teenager age. But Debbie's still too financially invested, and she's like,
pushing forward.
We got to go to the house tomorrow. So the next day, Arnie goes to the house to drop off some boxes, and he reports that he felt 2 sharp taps on his shoulder. Then, while they're at the house, the previous renter, Karen, stops by to get her water bed.
Oh, it's her water bed.
It was her water bed. And which, like, no better hallmark for a 1980 story than a water bed.
For sure.
Debbie asks if she's ever recognized, like, some kind of presence in the house. And Karen says, yeah, and definitely in the master bedroom.
Where the waterbed was.
Right.
She's
where
like,
her bed was.
Which is the reason why I left it for so long.
Right. And so she said that she saw the apparition of an old man, and she would sometimes feel like a cold body in the bed with her.
Ooh.
And she heard whisperings.
Is that the reason why she left?
One can assume, right? I mean, I would definitely let go of a lease.
And the waterbed.
And the waterbed.
Like, you can have that.
She did come back, though. She's devoted to that waterbed.
Well, yeah, well, they're expensive back then.
So Debbie is now freaked out. And Debbie decides that they won't be moving in. Now, because they're not moving in, the couple has to return to the Glatzels' home with Judy and the boys.
So they never moved in?
No, they never even officially moved in. And this is literally like July 2nd, right?
So it was like July 1st trying to move in, July 2nd, nope, we're not doing it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the next day, shit starts to happen.
At the Glatzel
July
home.
3rd, at the Glatzel home, shit starts to happen. David starts to freak out, saying that the beast is coming to their home, that he's on its way. And he's like, he's coming, he's getting closer. And then he's like, he's coming, he's at the front door, he's here, the beast is here. And so they're all there, they're freaking out. And Judy, like, they can't see anything. So Judy does the only thing that she can think of doing, which is grabbing a very appropriate weapon, and that weapon is holy water.
Oh, so I was gonna go with butcher knife, but okay.
No. We're on a Catholic page already.
Gotcha.
Okay. So she grabs her holy water from the church and she starts throwing it all over the door. And David then says that the beast does not like this and he is returning to the rental house. So that's day 3, literally July 3rd. The next day, the 4th of July, everything seemed normal during the day. The family went to go to a celebration. But then that night when they're getting back, David is frightened to go in the house, and he has become convinced that the beast is in the house. He has made his way in through the attic, and he's terrified. But everyone is like, just let it go. It's not that big deal. Like, they're all trying to calm him down, whatever. That night, everyone goes to sleep, and then Debbie and Arnie are awoken at, do you want to guess what time?
I'm going to say either midnight or 3 a.m.
3 a.m., baby. So they're woken up at 3 a.m. to the sound of footsteps in the attic. Debbie wants to call the police. Arnie decides to go and investigate. So Arnie said that he went up and he couldn't see anything, but he did feel an ice cold presence that just kind of shifted through him. But he shrugs it off and goes and lays back down in the bed.
See, shrugging things off is where everyone just goes wrong in these stories.
Right. So then, for the next few minutes, they hear very, very loud footsteps and banging that seemed like it lasted for hours, but really just lasted for minutes.
Ooh.
And they just, like, lay there, like, not
Terrified.
sleeping, terrified, not knowing to do.
Above them. It's above them.
And it wakes up the whole family. So the next day, the whole family is, like,
Exhausted.
what the
and
fuck?
What the hell?
Exhausted. Yeah. And now everyone is experiencing the supernatural haunting, right?
They're all in it.
Yes. And I do think it's interesting, too. So, like, in interviews, Arnie expresses how challenging it was for him to... I mean, this is a Catholic family, so... And it's also, like, a generally Catholic area. So there is certainly a fear. But it was interesting because he seemed to be really critical initially.
Yeah, he's probably trying to debunk it and figure out there's got to be another explanation for this.
Exactly. July 5th, they're all in shock and they don't know how to handle it. They don't know what to do. And meanwhile, David is continuing to hear and see the beast.
So we're pretty much certain that this thing's attached itself.
It is attached itself to David. Okay. He is not yet possessed.
Right, no, but he's definitely attached to it. There's
an attachment. And it also seems to have attached itself to the home that they're all living in.
Which is so weird because its warning was don't move in. They didn't move in. Right. So it's like, okay, well, what the heck do you want?
But maybe because Debbie went back that
yeah, maybe.
She should have let it go. But anyway, David starts saying that the beast is delivering him direct messages. And so he goes to his mother, Judy, and tells her that the beast wants to let him know, to let her know that he is more powerful than Jesus Christ.
Ooh.
And David is told to take down all of like the relics, crucifixes, and other religious items that are in the house. Now, Judy, a devout Roman Catholic, is shocked and frightened.
Appalled.
Yeah, appalled, shocked, but also terrified.
Sure.
By
and then it's her son telling
behavior.
her this too.
Yeah.
It's like insane.
So in the midst of all of this happening, David's whole body suddenly jolts. And the family is witnessing this. Like, they're all sitting around in the living room and they see this. And it looks as if he's being strangled by an unseen force. His throat is eventually released by the grip, but then very quickly, bruise marks started to appear on his body as if he was physically choked and hurt. Okay, so now we're at July 10th. Judy has called a priest who decides that he will come to the house and do a blessing. That's, I feel like, a typical first response.
Very first
right?
response. Yeah.
And so he also gives David scapulars to wear, which is like, for lay people, it's like a very small necklace, and it's usually devoted to like a specific saint or the Virgin Mary, and it can be like as big as your thumb. And sometimes it's like worn on both sides though. Like it's a long necklace. Yeah. So for a moment after the blessing, they all feel like they're protected, especially the people that believe in the faith. But there is no rest, because then David claims to see his toy dinosaur come to life, telling him beware.
Like in the Poltergeist. Remember when all the toys like came to life and started like going crazy?
So Judy is crushed because she says, like,
why didn't this work? Type of thing.
Yeah. And also, like, her, the priest's blessing was not enough. So then that night, David jerks in pain and said that the beast had stabbed him. And he lays on the ground, and his family pulls up his shirt to see on his chest this large red mark, like down his chest. And then the beast communicates with David and tells him that he will suffer until he gives the beast his soul. And David says that he refuses to do so and that his soul belongs to Jesus Christ. Then the beast tells David that he will bring reinforcement. And with that, he calls upon 42 other like minor demons to the boy's body.
My God, what an asshole.
To control him.
Like 11-year-old kid. Right? Oh my gosh.
And so David can see like all of these disgusting figures. But what's really interesting is they're only given numbers.
Oh, they're not given the names?
No. And that's like one of those trickery things where it's like, in order to have more control of the situation, because if you can't call them by their Latin names,
then how can you get rid of them?
You can't identify them and get rid of them. They're also like reportedly told to like watch the family as well, like these demons that are in David. David also experiences, and he will like over the next couple of weeks experience multiple cases of these demons like beating on him, screaming at him, doing anything that they can to break his will. So at this point, Judy decides to call the priest again.
The same one from
before.
The
same one. But he gives her the number for the famous Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Dun, dun, dun.
On July 13th, Judy calls the Warrens, and they live not far away in a town, like a couple of towns over. And Lorraine actually said that the day that Judy called, they had gone on a drive together. And at one point during the ride, they had gone through Brookfield. And Lorraine marked to Ed that she had a feeling that something was going to happen in that town.
Oh, wow. Because she had like some psychic ability, right?
Yes. So she's recognized
as like a medium. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And actually, one of the things that she could do was she could see auras. So the very night that Judy calls the Warrens, they come and they bring with them a physician to make sure that the symptoms that David is experiencing are not related like physically or mentally. So the physician looks over David and confirms that he's totally fine. So now the Warrens can focus on David's suffering as like a paranormal event. While they are there, David even tells them that the beast was present. And Lorraine, who, as we mentioned, could see auras, said that she could see like the lurking aura of the beast.
Oh, wow.
So Ed asks David to have the beast identify himself, and that's when he says that the beast, as he has been called, is actually Satan.
Oh, wow. So he's the big guy.
Yes. So
so they're
right.
Told.
This is
because
not,
demons do lie.
Right. This is not like your second rate demon.
Yeah.
This is.
Although I feel like if I was a demon and I wasn't the devil, I would oftentimes tell people I was.
That's true. That's a really solid point. I mean,
at that point, you're a demon. You might as well just lie your way through all of it.
That's true. I mean, it would be very on brand for them.
For
anyway.
sure.
Okay, so Satan and his 42 demonic helpers are now living in the Gladsell's house, and they're using David as their tool of communication. According to Lorraine, David is not yet fully possessed because he's still able to communicate between the beast and his family. However, the Warrens also know that the devil and his helpers would continue to press David and make him suffer until he either gives the devil his soul or doesn't, and then he'll die. Because, there's so many exorcism cases that are failures, and why did they fail? It's like the person died, right? So there's now an added level of concern because the Warrens and, the family agree that he needs an exorcism. But as we know, there's a whole rigmarole to get...
Yeah. You can't just do it that day.
Right. So you have to get permission, and it can be very challenging, and it goes, all the way to the top, to the Pope.
Yep. Ultimate approval.
So Ed warns the family that in the meantime, they need to protect David, never leave him alone. And the Warrens give them holy candles and some salts for protection. Arne said in this interview that he felt really hopeful because the Warrens were supportive and they were going to be able to give them their help. So he's really hopeful. But not long after they leave, David is seized by an attack. And as his body writhes, unnaturally, of course, he picks up a knife and begins to attack his brother Alan, holding the knife to his throat.
Oh my God. So things have really escalated by this point.
Yes. Arne picks up holy water, and David, in another voice, threatened that he would kill Alan if Arne threw the water. Arne then began to recite Psalm 23, and that's when David falls to the ground, which, the Lord is my shepherd, a really good psalm to have on point.
It's a solid one.
So either Debbie or Judy, they immediately call the Warrens, who were just getting home, and they're like, yeah, you need to come back because what the
stuff's
hell?
Going down.
Yeah. So while they wait for them to return, at one point, David actually starts to turn blue. And Arne was attempting to perform CPR on the boy. And so, while they're there waiting for the Warrens to show up, they are thinking David is dead.
Yeah, going into, some sort of cardiac arrest or something.
And so, as soon as the Warrens arrive, David comes back. And of course, this is a big deal because for the Warrens, they feel like, they're posing a threat to the devil because of all of their knowledge and their strength. And they're going to kick ass with this case. I swear to God, that's what
this is their time to shine.
Right? So for the next 2 weeks, after that event, the family experiences daily torment, and David experiences over a dozen episodes of possession. And so...
is he, fully possessed at this point?
So this is the thing, and, Lorraine made a big point about saying this in this case, is, and actually Ed did too. According to them, you're never fully possessed 24 hours a day. You come in and out of it.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
And there are, in most cases of accepted possession, you're usually not remembering what's going on during the possession, and that point will come up later. So there are times where David is kind of present both because he's being used as a communication tool.
But it seems like now it's not just attached to him. Like it's more.
He is experiencing like waves
of possession.
Okay. So things would levitate. There would be pounding on the walls, and there were physical attacks to his body. The most common forms that we hear. So the family does what they can, and that's using prayer, holy water, and religious objects for support.
I mean, like, what can you really do at that point?
Yeah, I know.
As a lay person.
They're also expected, though, to kind of like record everything that's going on with him. So Debbie was instructed to write a daily journal, and she would record tapes of like when they were saying prayers at times when David was possessed. And so she and Arne would actually like take turns watching over David, spending time with him, and like so would other members of the family. And she would record every time that he went under possession so that then they had this tangible proof that's required by the bishop.
You gotta hold him down, he told me to. Hold him on the ground, he said. David, Mommy's here. Mommy's here. Come on, wake up. Come on, get up. Come on, let's go. Get out of it. Get out of my son. Get out of my son. Come on. Come on, son. Son, get up. Get away from my son. No! I'm your mother. David, David. Wake up. Get up. Yes, David. He's the Holy One who loves you. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. You can't sit him up until
in this audio, you're hearing Arne, like saying prayers. You're hearing the mother Judy trying to talk to her son, but he's not there. He is possessed.
Oh my God.
That laugh. And then at one point he says like, "This is not David."
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's like the stuff of nightmares.
Yes.
And he's 11.
He
did not sound 11.
No. And that's the other thing that's so crazy about this, because obviously this audio that they're capturing is capturing his voice changing and everything.
Yeah. I wish they would have had like a clip of what he sounded like before.
I'm sure you could find it.
Because that did not sound like a kid.
That does not sound like a kid.
Like Arne sounded like a 19-year-old.
Right.
Mom sounded like an adult. He did not sound like even human.
Right. Well.
Obviously, yeah, no. And you can't like fake that. I'm sorry. 11-year-old boys that aren't.
And also the growling sound and like the evil laughter.
And it sounds like multiple voices. It didn't even sound like one. It sounded like multiple sounds coming out of this little child.
Yeah. There's that.
Thank you for the nightmare that I will have tonight, Emily.
Right? Sorry. That's why I said like this is a really crazy case. Okay, so that's all going on, right? For 2 weeks in July, this is happening. Then on July 26th, Alan is in the house alone and he hears a hissing sound coming from the bedroom. And the sound of a hissing snake, like a hissing like a snake, would actually foreshadow when other family members were going to be attacked. And so that night, Debbie claimed that while she laid in bed, she felt something pull her hand. Like she said she was a stomach sleeper and she would sleep with like her hand under her pillow, and she felt something like harshly
reach under and grab her.
Yeah. Everyone in the family is like getting messed with, but of course like David is still the
main target.
Yeah. And then the next day, July 27th, Arne sees the apparition of a man with eyes that looked like deep pits. He said that it looked like you could like fall into this person's eyes. They recognize as like the first time that someone besides David is able to see the demon. So August 1st, Judy momentarily leaves David alone, and when she returns to him, in another voice, he says that David is not present and that his soul now belongs to him, this other voice. Then he warns that someone will die. So Judy calls the Warrens.
I'm sure.
And a priest. And when they arrive, they find David levitating in the bed, and the voice is saying David is gone. And, like, according to Lorraine Warren, this is one of the creepiest things that she ever witnessed.
The boy levitating.
The boy levitating. She said, like, she knows the devil does fucked up stuff, but she never considered that it could be, like, this bad with a little boy.
Sad.
Yeah. Well, and also it's like that animalistic behavior. It's like unimaginable.
Well, it's something that the human brain can't fathom. Like, you know?
Yeah. Well, and also, like, I mean, we can't even fathom, like, people being mean in our culture.
Right.
So,
Let alone levitating.
Yeah. So then they call on another priest, and because they're at a breaking point now, especially now that this demon is saying that David is gone.
Yeah,
right?
that I have him and he's in my possession.
So they call on another priest who is willing to perform an informal exorcism at the local Catholic church. And this would be only the minor rite, and it's just like a series of prayers. So it's not as intense as your standard exorcism, but I mean, it's
more effective than doing nothing.
Exactly. And it's also a priest getting involved, where for the most part it's like lay people.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm sure that's an element of it. When they brought David, he was going like so crazy that they literally had to wrap him in a sheet to take him to the church. And I will say, like, this really reminded me of like the Ronald Hunkler case, like them having to take him and like getting to the breaking point with all of this. So while he's at the church, he talked in tongues, which is now new in a sense, and he was speaking in Latin. He was cursing, saying blasphemous things, which none of this is normal for this little boy. And also, like, a big part of David's possession is there are often like things flying around while he's being possessed. David at one point during this exorcism actually stopped breathing, and Debbie freaked out and convinced them that they needed to stop. However, Lorraine was like really against this, and the next time that they agreed to do an exorcism, she was like, you cannot stop. Like, you're being tricked into thinking that he's dead.
Oh.
You have to stick with it. Like, you're letting the devil win.
Yeah, that's what they want you to do, is to stop.
Right. But also, I mean, like, I could understand, like,
from a mother's point of view, yeah. My son's not breathing.
That was his sister too, but still, you know, like, yeah, for sure. Like, we all have our breaking point.
Yeah. And here's the thing, the demons know what that is.
Exactly. So the next exorcism is scheduled the following week. And so, you know, the Warrens are very adamant that it must be completed. And they choose a significant date, September 8th. And their hope is that this will be an easygoing, calmer exorcism, because this is the feast day that celebrates the Virgin Mary's birth. It's also known as the Nativity of Mary. So they're going with, you know, soft and lightness. They bring David to the church, and it is actually a calm exorcism. David is hopeful that everything is going to be okay. The family is hopeful, and they go back home, and at midnight, the devil has returned to physically attacking David. And at this point, they said that he was running around incredibly fast. So, like, exhibiting these, like, superhuman
behavior and tendencies.
Abilities.
Yeah.
They said that, like, they witnessed him doing, like, inhumane movements and gyrations, and that, like, these objects in the room were moving. So he's moving at a point where, like, they're freaked out. So Debbie decides to tie him to a chair with a belt. And when they do that, Arne comes in and screams and challenges the demon to leave David alone and to come into him instead.
Oh, Arnie. Such good intentions.
Right? Like he's trying to be protective, and
Of
he
his
also
girlfriend's
thinks
younger
like,
brother, yeah.
well, this little boy can't handle
I
it.
can. I'm 19.
Can. And so they continue on with prayers, using holy water, and then at dawn, the family and the Warrens all feel as if David was exorcised. And it was the first time since all of this started in July that he seemed like himself. So then it's like, okay,
We're done. Yeah.
we're done. The Warrens are like, Arnie fucked up though.
They knew.
Yeah. And they tell Arnie that he needs to watch himself because he just invited a demon into his body.
And that is
Okay?
like the biggest invite,
Yes.
the quickest response to an invite you can get to a demon
Yes.
is being like, come into me.
And like literally the worst invitation.
The worst.
You know?
There's no RSVP. They just show up.
Yeah. It's bad. But the thing is, they thought everything returned to normal, and so they go back to like attempting to live normal lives. Okay, so fast forward just like a month or two. By November of 1980, David has turned 12 years old. He's healthy and happy, and Arnie has not experienced any signs of possession. So Debbie, being a dog groomer, finds a new job working for this guy named Alan Bono, who lived in Brookfield, and he runs the local dog kennel. A part of her getting this job, dog grooming, was that Arnie and Debbie could move into an apartment that was on the kennel's grounds. So Alan is both their landlord and Debbie's boss, and he lives in like an apartment above the kennel. So they're all like on the same property together. He's also identified though as more than just a landlord and a boss, and he seems to be a friend of Arnie and Debbie, and he's considered to be a drinking buddy, as some people put an emphasis on.
He liked his liquor.
Yeah. And actually, I did think it was interesting. Like, I'm pretty sure this was like the last year that you could drink under the age of 21.
Oh, so Arnie was probably drinking
I think
a ton.
he was legally drinking
Yeah.
too. So on the night of February 16th, 1981, the Brookfield police receive a call of a physical altercation at the dog kennel. Alan Bono is still alive when the responders arrive, but Debbie alerted that he had been stabbed. Debbie stated that it had been Arnie who stabbed Alan, but that he was not right in mind when he did it. So after a day of drinking, Debbie reported that Alan had started to get belligerent and things escalated when Debbie and Arnie attempted to leave. So there's a couple tellings of the story. I'm just going to stick to one. Alan had grabbed Debbie, and Arnie put up his arms to fight, like was pissed off about this. And that's when Debbie said that she recognized the presence of the devil in Arnie that she had witnessed so many times in David.
Oh, wow.
His facial features and his teeth changed. Later, she would claim that he sounded like he was growling, and she compared it to the Incredible Hulk, which was like very popular at that time. So Arnie had stabbed Alan multiple times and then took off, and he was later located near the Glatzel family house. Like, he was trying to get back to there. Debbie claimed that when the police found the murder weapon, a knife, by the victim, it was glowing as if it had some power to it.
The police said that?
The police and Debbie seem to both acknowledge that.
Wow.
So I don't know how true that is, but I like the sound of it.
Yeah, it sounds good.
So then they had to go look for Arnie because he took off. And so when he was arrested, the police officer noted that they didn't feel threatened by him, but he kept saying that something had happened that he couldn't remember. So in the meantime, Alan Bono died in the hospital within an hour of the attack. The detectives then meet with Arnie that night, and he appeared confused and dazed, and he couldn't even understand like why he was in jail, what happened. And he's shocked when he's informed that he's being arrested for murder. So they like arrest him that night. It's cut clean, you know, like
he did it. It's
domestic,
clear.
you know, a domestic assault or something.
His girlfriend witnessed it and said he did it.
They were drinking, you know, whatever. So he's held in jail, and he was held for like a really high bond too. Like, I want to say like $125,000, which like
Even back then.
I doubt he would have had it.
Yeah.
So the Glatzels call the Warrens while Arnie is in jail, and the Warrens are not shocked
They
to
told you
learn
so.
about this development. Instead, they believe that the devil has taken advantage of a moment of Arnie's anger to be present and to do harm. And Debbie says, because the demon had said this coming through David, he came for a soul and he took one.
Wow. Especially one that invited it in.
Right? But that's like when he was in David, he was saying like somebody's gonna die.
Yep.
So guess
Doesn't gotta be you, but it's gotta be someone.
Someone is gonna die. So Ed and Lorraine even go to the police and they share like all of this information that had happened over the summer. And Lorraine alleges that the entity had transferred from David to Arnie, and that's what caused the stabbing. Of course, the police are skeptical.
Of course.
I mean, I could understand why, but this instantly becomes news, instantly becomes a headline, and people in the town, especially in the area, they're very devout Catholics. So it's not far off for them to believe in like demonic possession, you know?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, like Ed and Lorraine, they go on this campaign because one argument is that this is their ability to prove their life's work is real.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Put the devil on trial. But that's also why they received a lot of criticism, you know? Because in a sense, like, they were using someone else's situation.
Right, to further
prove their
themselves.
point. Martin Minnella is Arnie's defense attorney, and he even agreed to take the case pro bono, and he was ready to argue that the devil made Arnie commit this crime. He fully believed that Arnie was possessed and that there was no way that he was capable of committing this crime under any other circumstances. And they talk about him. They talk about Arnie, you know, they're like, oh, this light-haired, you know, shy, quiet boy. Like, there's no way he could have done this. There's news outlets that are focused on this, that are identifying this as the devil made me do it case, which is what it's most like commonly seen as. The defense attorney Minnella, he goes and does like all of these interviews with different news outlets. He was on like CNN. He's getting contacted by people like across the world about this case, and he's talking about it. Now, when the trial started, October 28th, 1981, the judge shocks everyone by saying that he would not allow the defense to use demonic possession as their reason.
Oh my God, that was like their whole case.
I know, right?
You there. You must not use anything you already said about this.
Because his point was not that he didn't necessarily think that it was a relative
but
possibility.
How can you prove it?
But how could you prove it? It cannot be proven. So Minnella had to work really quick, and he changed the plea to self-defense. And he claims that, you know, for Arnie, that Alan Bono was the aggressor when he attacked Arnie, and that Arnie was just doing what he could to protect himself and Debbie. And I am sure that they probably framed Alan maybe as like a drunk.
Sure.
Of course.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Wanting to like, because he touched her and grabbed her or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. So on November 24th, the jury makes a deliberation after 17 hours over 3 days, and they find that Arnie is not guilty of first-degree murder.
Oh, really?
But he is convicted of manslaughter in the first degree. So he was sentenced to 10 to 20 years, but he actually was released in less than 5 years for good behavior. Arnie and Debbie get married while he's still in prison, and when he's released, they went on to have 2 children. They lived very happily until Debbie passed away in April of 2021 from cancer. So that's basically it. Now, I do feel the need to note some criticism. So the Glatzel family was permanently torn apart by this whole ordeal. And actually, there's another brother named Carl Jr., who was a part of all of this, but he was cut from the story. And he claimed that Ed and Lorraine had fabricated the story and used his family's emotional trauma just to make money. And he insisted that David was experiencing childhood mental illness that the Warrens and members of his own family saw as a way to make money.
But did David go on to display any type of behavior?
No, he didn't. But David and Carl did file a lawsuit, like in the 2000s, saying that they were being like
brainwashed or whatever,
that this story was being used, basically. So he has since kind of denied it, but Arne
David, you
has,
mean?
Yeah, David. I mean,
well, and he was 11. He could be swayed by anyone he was close to at that age. I would, you know what I mean? 11-year-olds are pretty like.
Yeah. And the thing is like, so anytime that we talk about all of this, we're telling it from one point of view.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. And it's a theory.
It is a theory. And I will say, and this has always been my issue with the Warrens, like, I dig what they did, but they do have like some questionable motives,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because to what extent are you really going after all of this?
Well, and it sounds like too, Arne had obviously some. Okay, if you're going by the theory that the devil made him do it, but did he ever get exorcised? Did the demon ever leave him?
And that's my question about all of this, because it's not as though he was. Now, I do always wonder though, like, if I wonder if there could be some substance abuse issues present in Arnie's life that might have contributed to things, you know, drugs and alcohol.
I mean, he did make that reference about...
He did ask about pills.
Sure.
So
obviously he was thinking about it.
You don't know that pills do weird shit if you've never taken a pill that makes you do weird shit.
Well, and sometimes on the flip side, someone can argue that demons they're vulnerable when you're using like substances. You're not able to fully control yourself anyway, let alone when a demon's trying to get at you.
Yeah,
they're tricky fellows.
Yeah. So crazy.
That is creepy.
I'm done.
Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Hosting Evil. For more information on this case and others, you can visit our website at hostingevilpodcast.com.
And don't forget to check us out on social media at Hosting Evil Podcast.
Until next time, I'm Jess. Peace, love, and light.
And I'm Emily. Keep fighting those demons.
Hosting Evil is recorded and produced by Carly Strange at Rockdale Studios.